so glad to see all of you here, because the way we're going to be a safe community is by working together. So the fact that you've all shown up today, and even the people that are outside that aren't able to see the presentation, we've got an overflow audience. We're just really grateful. We're also live streaming this on Facebook, and it will be on our Facebook page from this point forward, so that any of your neighbors, people that you know, that you work with in the area, can come back and look at it. This is important information. We've got a great lineup of speakers for you from the Sheriff's Department, Emergency Preparedness, and our District Supervisor, Linda Hopkins. We are really excited about sharing the information with you, and then having a question and answer period, so you'll all be able to have questions. We're going to be passing baskets through the presentation periods, and we've given you cards. And we just ask that you just write your questions down, send them in. If you need more cards, raise a hand, and we'll just keep funneling questions up here.
Are you Amy?
I am, thank you. I always do that at the beginning of these meetings. I'm Amy. I'm part of the Fire Safe Occidental organization. We're a group of amazing volunteers that are hoping that you'll come join us so that we can continue doing things like this. Carol and Ruthie are behind me. You're going to see a lot of them tonight. The three of us are going to be keeping things going for you. And then there's a lot of other volunteers of our steering committee, all wearing these same t-shirts. Everybody sort of raise your hand if you're on the steering committee, stand up so they can find you. We've got people all over wearing these t-shirts. If you have a question, you need something, come to one of us. A little bit about our history before we get on is that Fire Safe Occidental was actually started by one of your fellow neighbors, Carl, and Carolyn. Where is Carolyn? She was outside with the map, showing you which neighborhood you were in. And they were very interested in what can we do as a neighborhood group to be safer. And the things that we're working on and that we've become more active in, we've now even got subcommittees for, is how do we reduce the fuel load so that we're less likely to be in a fire in the first place? What do we do to mitigate our risks? And then in the event of an emergency, how can we be more prepared? Which is one of these things, this meeting today, to educate the rest of us to know what we need to do. And we're also writing grants to get money so that we can help with people who don't have the money to do some of the fuel mitigation in their neighborhood. So there's lots of activities, and we really would love your involvement. If you are apt at social media, come help us do better at social media. If you know how to make newsletters, we send out newsletters every once in a while, help us with that. If you know something about forestry and fire mitigation, come help. And if you just know how to use this chainsaw or a clipper, come help. It doesn't really matter what you can do. We would find a place for you, and this is truly just a volunteer team effort. So we'd love your involvement. And the other thing is to get involved in your own neighborhood. We are trying to rally individual neighborhoods, smaller groups, because that's really where the juice is. That's who you know. You know if somebody needs help. I don't know if somebody needs help on Harrison Grade. I'm up on Joy Ridge. But you do. You know your neighbors, and if you don't, have a potluck and get to know them and start this process, because it's actually fun. The Joy Ridge neighborhood has gotten really close in the last 6 months since we started doing this. Some of the other things we're doing is we're advocating for the area with PG&E. We're doing all sorts of things, whatever we see that could help make us have less risk and be better prepared. So if there's something you need also, please reach out to us. Let's see. Oh, we handed you a neighborhood flyer, and it has the list of the neighborhoods. If you're not already active in a neighborhood, I highly encourage you to get active, contact the person there, and help get your neighborhood moving. We also have become a 501(c), or we're in the process of becoming a 501(c), and so we're looking for people that can help us to run the nonprofit. It's a small, volunteer nonprofit. There's not a huge amount, but we're looking for help with that. And we're also taking donations, because everything that we do right now is coming out of our own pockets. Tonight we've got presentations, then we'll do a Q&A. We'll do a parking lot for any questions that don't get answered, and we will follow up and find answers for you. So don't worry if everything doesn't get answered. And I think that's about it.
I'd like to introduce our speakers today. Zachary Hamill from the Sonoma County Office of Emergency Services, Linda Hopkins, our West County Supervisor. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Adrian Mancia.
And Adrian Nancy, he came in new today, but he's one of our sheriffs in this area. And Misty Woods, who also works for the Sheriff's Department. Thank you.
Jack will let us take it away.
So, good evening, everyone. Emergency Coordinator Zachary Hamill from Some County Department of Emergency Management. This is roughly what we're going to be talking about tonight. We're going to talk about some preparedness, some de-energization, some alert and warning issues, how to evacuate, and what you should do. So, the three of us, me from the Department of Emergency Management and the two from the Sheriff's Office, are going to bounce back and forth during this PowerPoint. So, I'm sure you've all seen this. This is your first step in doing preparedness, is getting your property ready in case of a fire. So getting that 30-foot buffer zone around zone 1 around your house, and then going out to 100 feet in zone 2, clearing out vegetation and getting ready. Our key message tonight is going to be ready, set, go. So right now is you getting ready. When we say, hey, there's an evacuation warning, that's when you get set. And then when we say evacuation order, that's when you go. And I have a slide on that later, but we'll get into more detail on that. But that is our key message tonight: is ready, set, go, and then connect with your neighbors. Just like the two ladies introducing us tonight. Fire Safe Council, your COPE groups, so your communities organized to prepare for emergencies, getting to know your neighbors, potlucks, block parties. That is great things to get prepared and knowing your neighbors. The other thing you can do is go to that website right there, socoemergency.org. Socoemergency.org is our clearinghouse, if you will, for emergency preparedness information. Also, in a disaster, you can go there and get information, and then after a disaster, you can go there and get recovery information. So that's our spot where we share all those key items for you. So, in preparedness, getting to know where to get information and what information you need to be prepared is a critical item. Red flag warnings. So, when our relative humidity is 25% or less, our temperatures are over 75 degrees, and we have more than 15 miles per hour wind, that is a red flag condition. That is when you really want to start paying attention to what's going on around you in your community, because that is a prime time for a fire to start and to really make a run. Another thing to pay attention to is our early fire detection cameras. Alertwildfire.org/North Bay. There's actually more than 11 cameras now. There's probably close to 20 cameras now between us, Marin, and Napa. And you can actually see on if you go and there's an active fire going if there was an active fire going right now, you can see multiple cameras pointed at it as dispatch watches what's going on, so that you can send the correct resources for that. Snow and Water was our first funder for those, and PG&E has funded some of them. CAL FIRE's funded some more. So that network of cameras is growing, and we have a grant right now to add additional cameras, specifically out here in the West County. So pay attention to that. That is another good website resource just to keep up your situational awareness in your neighborhood. So another key component to your preparedness and staying aware to what's going on is this electrical de-energization. So when PG&E says they're going to do a public safety power shutoff, a PSPS, they're talking about turning off the power, so you won't have power. Part of the challenge with that is it's not like the rolling blackouts in the early 2000s where that was only for a couple hours. We're talking about days, maybe even a week long. So the challenge is when they turn the power off, then they have to go and inspect every single inch of line that they turned off before they can turn it back on. So that is part of the delay. They can't do it at night. They're going to use helicopters, they're going to use people walking on the ground, they're going to use vehicles. They're going to try and get it done as fast as they can, but they have to inspect every foot of line. So, with that said, This summer, they're talking about that happening more often, especially after last year's Camp Fire and the 2017 wine country fires. So the frequency is going to increase and the duration is going to increase because they're going to do larger areas of de-energization. CPUC, the California Public Utilities Commission, has come out and said, when you do that, you have to notify everyone. So they're going to call you. They're going to try and let you know that. If you are on their medical baseline, they're going to try and go door to door. If you didn't answer your door, they're going to put a door hanger, if you will, a flyer on your door to let you know what's coming. They said best case scenario, 48 hours notice. The two we had last year was roughly 6 hours notice, so it can happen pretty quick. The issue with de-energization, especially after day 2 and day 3, is people's battery backups start to die. So we'll have ancillary issues besides just having your power out. You won't be able to use your phones. You won't have internet. You won't have these things that you rely on day to day. That is an issue, especially when we talking about alert and warning in the next couple slides. How are we, when we know something's coming, going to notify you? So we have some alternatives, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But that's something that we started focusing on, is as this de-energization comes, how can we better prepare for that? So we've updated our response annex to include 911 and alert and warning and public safety impacts, and what would that expanded public services look like in that event. We did do a workshop with our response partners last week to kind of outline some of those issues. And then next week on August 6th, we're actually going to take that new plan to the Board of Supervisors for them to adopt. So, alert and warning. So we have a new alert and warning manager. He's actually here in the crowd tonight. He's going to be outside after this meeting to talk to you about getting signed up and the options that we have if you have any additional questions. But what we're focusing on, especially after the 2017 wine country fires, is maximizing our system. So we now use the wireless emergency alert, we use the emergency alert system, and we're also now using NOAA weather radios. There's going to be a weather radio demonstration outside afterwards, and I have a box of what one looks like up here on the table. Thank you to the chief from Brayton. So we have a number of ways to reach you in a disaster. We have SoCo Alert, please sign up. That will call you, send you an email, send you a text message, however, whatever means you provided in that system, that's how we will use to reach you. In addition to that, that wireless emergency alert, it looks like an Amber Alert that comes across your phone. And let me skip ahead here. So the one on the right here that says emergency alert, that was one that we issued back in February this year when the river was flooding. So that's what it looks like on an iPhone, if you will. The one on the left, that is the EAS, the Emergency Alert System. That is what goes across your favorite TV show or your radio station right when it gets good for the required weekly test, right? So right when it's getting good, that comes on. So those are two other systems that we're going to be using to reach you. And in a disaster, these are going to be critical because a lot of times phone lines are impacted by that disaster. Lastly, like I talked about, let me go back one, is that NOAA weather radio. So the weather radio, we actually have a weather radio transmitter here in the county, and that is something that the National Weather Service utilizes to send out maritime weather, to do EAS broadcasts. They use it for a number of things. But we've done a partnership with them so that when we do an evacuation order or any kind of emergency notification, we can use that system to notify those in Sonoma County that something's going on. In addition to that, in September, we're going to do another alert and warning exercise, and that's going to exercise the weather radio. We're going to exercise our SoCo alert system. We're going to exercise EAS. We're going to exercise these systems that we use to make sure that we have the best understanding of how they work and how they interact with the public. And then lastly, we're still working on grants for sirens and more weather radios. So that's something else that we're actively working on. I think I'm going to turn it over to you for a second.
So as Zach outlined everything there, you can see that the County Emergency Management Department owns that alert and warning system. But the Sheriff's Office also has tools that we use to warn you and alert you of emergencies because it really is a team effort to keep you safe. The first tool that we use is Nixle, which probably almost everybody has heard of before. This is what a Nixle text message looks like. This is a screenshot. So the important thing is we try to have a very succinct title in the text, and there's a link that you need to click on with more information. And that will give you more details about that particular evacuation. We don't always know how much, we don't know exactly what's going on immediately. The first few minutes of emergencies are typically chaotic. It's just the nature of emergencies. But we will give you as much information as we can. There are a few important things about Nixle. Number one, sign up for Nixle. It's an opt-in system, so go to nixle.com to sign up. Number two, make sure you adjust your settings. When you go to nixle.com, you can adjust your settings to see what kinds of alerts you get and how you receive them. So there are 3 types of messages that Nixle will send out. There's an alert, which is the highest level. That's the one the Sheriff's Office uses if you need to take immediate action, like an evacuation. And that comes through on your cell phone like a text message, but kind of louder and more obnoxious. The middle level is called an advisory. The Sheriff's Office uses that when you need to take action, but it's not quite as urgent. So for instance, we use advisories for missing persons and when we have an evacuation warning. The lowest level is called community. That typically goes out via email, but you can adjust your settings. And those are non-urgent messages that the Sheriff's Office typically uses for news and information. So it's nothing you need to know right away, but it's our way of still staying connected with you. The other way that we can reach you is with our deputies. They're our boots on the ground. They are the ones who know your neighborhood, they know the area, they're assigned to particular zones for a period of time, so they get to know the people and they get to know the area. After this meeting, we actually have a couple deputies here right now. You'll be able to talk to your deputies and ask them questions as well. They're going to be potentially giving you instructions over the PA system and the patrol car. So if we can reach you and our deputies are there, that's one way they'll be giving you instructions is over through the PA system on the car. They may also be knocking on your doors, telling you to evacuate, telling you to get out. One thing that's kind of challenging in a rural area are gates. If you have a gate, we ask that you please call dispatch and give us your gate code. And the dispatch phone number is 565-2121. I'll have this at the end of the presentation too. Because if our deputies need to get to you quickly, they could just ram through your gate and get to you, let's be honest. But we would rather just have a gate code that they can enter the information and get to you quickly and safely. The next way we might get a hold of you is through high-low sirens on the patrol cars. And I have a clip here so you can hear what that sounds like. But when you hear the high-low sirens, you need to pay attention and be ready to take action. So look outside, talk to your neighbors, look for your alerts, look for local news, local radio, social media sites that are trusted, and figure out what's going on. Because we're only going to use high-low sirens when you need to do something right now. I mentioned social media. The Sheriff's Office uses social media to augment the evacuation. So don't rely on social media for your evacuation notices, but we do post evacuation notices on our social media sites as one more way that you can get information. So I'm going to show you what the high-low siren sounds like right now. Did you all hear that, or do you want me to do it one more time? One more time? A lot louder than that? Tell you what. I have an idea. Yep. This might just be louder. high-low siren, so we're only gonna use that in an emergency where you need to take action right away.
Is that how long it goes for too?
No, it goes as long as the deputy chooses to use it. So I just wanna do a short clip so you don't dream about it tonight, because it'll get stuck in your head. I'm gonna turn it over to Zach so he can finish his presentation, and the lieutenant and I will follow up from there.
Okay, evacuation plan. One of the reasons why we're here tonight, right? So, we have a new evacuation annex, a new evacuation plan, if you will, at the county level. It started off with creating evacuation zones in the community. So we took the areas in the community and broke them into zones, and then we did an assessment of each of those zones. What was the challenges to do evacuations? So what were the road conditions? What kind of vegetation was along the road? Is there any history of fire in the area? And it came up with a number ranking. So from there, we took that number ranking and prioritized each zone. So now what we're working on right now is building evacuation plans for each of those zones, especially the high risk zones. From that effort, we're taking that and putting it into the county's evacuation plan, and in a couple slides, I'll be talking about the residential evacuation guide. From that, we're going to be doing exercises and drills, coming out into the community and teaching people about those plans and how best to get out when we ask them to. So, the county evacuation plan. So we go into the concept of operations, we talk about roles and responsibilities, what the sheriff's responsible for, what Department of Emergency Management is responsible for, what the emergency operations is responsible for, what the local fire districts are responsible for. So we talk about all those roles and responsibilities when it comes to evacuations. Then we also talk about, well, how do we get that information and how do we analyze that information and disseminate it when we actually do need to do an evacuation? How do we know when to call for an evacuation? From that, we break it out into regional areas. So Occidental, Camp Meeker, that would be kind of a regional evacuation plan. That turns into a community evacuation plan. So specific community groups within that region would have their own plan. And then we talk about re-entry. So how do we get people back in after we ask them to leave? And then lastly, a checklist for all of us to make sure that we get everything done that we need to get done. So that concept of operations is really broken into two phases, the pre-evacuation and then the evacuation. So the pre-evacuation is right now what we're doing, the public education. So what does this look like and how does that impact you? Developing those evacuation zones that I talked about through our mapping software, and then assisting in developing those evacuation plans. Then during the actual evacuation, how do we develop that situational awareness so we know when and where? How do we communicate that threat and those evacuation instructions to you in the community so you know what's coming at you, where to go, where to get more resources, where to get more information? In addition to that, how do we actually conduct those evacuation operations in that specific regional area? And then other considerations that we take into thought there are access and functional needs communities. So those who have mobility challenges, animals, how do we evacuate and shelter animals? And then lastly, sheltering operations. So where can you go if you don't have a family or friend nearby that you can crash on their couch? Where can you get a cot to stay? So that's kind of the county. That's our overarching umbrella plan. And then we break it into these regional plans like I talked about. So we broke it into 9 regions in the county. Then those are to be used for those first responders, those fire districts, in aiding in that evacuation. This map right here is an example of the Sonoma Valley one. That's the first one that we created. We're slowly going around creating all of them, and we hope to have that done by September. But this is the first one that we've created right now. And as you can see, we have multiple arrows. So the red arrow is your primary route. The solid blue area would be your secondary, and then the dotted blue is your tertiary or your alternate. So for Sonoma Valley, they're going to go down Highway 12 and try and get to 37. If it's impacted, they can go out 116 to Petaluma or out 12 to Napa. But then there's also, within that planning, is assembly points. So as you're evacuating, where can you go to be safe and get more information and know what's going on where to go next. So, well, developing these assembly points, and then from there, like I said, those shelters. And then lastly, as part of that regional plan, it would be creating maps. So, and then distributing all that. Taking one step further down, where it really impacts you is those community evacuation plans. And what we've done is we've created a framework of here are the items that you need to be thinking about as you develop this. And primarily the people who are going to be developing is your local fire districts and your local fire safe councils. So clearly define that area. What area are we planning to evacuate? What are those risks? So is there a tsunami risk? Is there a fire risk? Is there a flooding risk? Is there a landslide risk? What are those risks that would create the incident that would make the need for us to do an evacuation? What are some of those special needs for that community? Are there roads right now that have been impacted by recent disasters that would not allow people to evacuate? What are the routes of evacuation? Where are good assembly areas that everyone in the community knows to go to and how to get to? And then creating this map. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking all these community plans and we're going to be putting them up on that SoCo emergency website. So yeah, you may get the flyer and you may read it, but in 2 years, what was that plan? What were we supposed to do? You can go to the website and see what you're supposed to do and refresh your memory. So one of the things that we've been doing is we've been utilizing a lot of terminology here, and some of it may be new. So evacuation warning, what does that mean? So that is that, remember that ready, set, go that I said at the beginning? That evacuation warning is your notification that, hey, get ready to go, get set. So if you take additional time, if you need to take additional time to get ready, or you have lots of animals or livestock, or any other thing that maybe you have some health issues, whether it's breathing smoke or whatever, maybe now's the time for you to actually get out because it's going to take you longer. The evacuation order means, hey, we're closing this area and it is not safe for you to be here and you need to leave. And it is lawfully closed to public access. And then the last one is shelter in place. So go indoors, close your windows, seal yourself into your house basically, because the hazard is so great that we don't want you actually leaving. So that's primarily used in a hazardous material spill or something along those lines where it's really not safe for you to actually leave to get to a safe area. It's safer for you to stay in place. Next one is.
That's a clip from one of our sergeant's body-worn camera that he was wearing during the tough slide. I'm not sure you can really grasp the feeling of it. There's no audio, but it was an extremely chaotic event. Words just can't describe how difficult that situation was. With that in mind, just to give you a little bit of history of who I am, who's the person up here talking to you. I've been in law enforcement for 24 years, and I've been here at the Sheriff's Office for almost 19. And through all my years in law enforcement, nothing really could have prepared us for that. You don't go to the academy, and they don't teach a scenario on how to do mass evacuations. It just doesn't happen. So these are things that we learn on the job. It's just part of what we do, right? It's unfortunate things got to this point, but it happened so quick. It could happen here as well. We could have a red flag warning and have 48 hours notice of advising folks. I'm a little tall. How's that? Yeah, that's better, isn't it? Thank you. So, like I was saying, no amount of training could really help you get traffic flowing. I can't tell you enough how much of a chaotic event that was. We did have some deputies and some homeowners that sought shelter in a particular area over off of Calistoga Road. We really want to hit home with this right here, and it's don't wait, evacuate. Like I mentioned, you get those red flag warnings, have your go bag ready, and just be ready to leave your residence because it's going to be imminent. I'll tell you what, I've been extremely impressed by this crowd right here tonight. This gives us a true sense of community. We're going to do a lot of these presentations throughout the county, and you guys are really setting the benchmark for the rest of the county, so kudos to you guys. Again, you want to move away from the threat. We can't necessarily tell you that we're going to be down on Bohemian Highway telling you to head towards Monorail when that's where the threat is, right? You have to have those multiple escape routes, as Zach touched on. Don't just keep one set evacuation route in mind, have multiple in mind.
How would we know if a route was closed?
Again, it's going to be an extremely dynamic event that's going to occur. So either have those primary, secondary routes. We may or may not be here in this area. We have, obviously, I'm sure most of you are familiar with 2 deputies that patrol all of West County or even the Guerneville area as well. So we may or may not be here. It's going to be that preparedness ahead of time that will be able to help you. Having neighbors that you know. I'll give you an example. So a little bit of my background is I was the sergeant in charge of the coroner's office during the fires. So I dealt with all 23 fatalities that occurred. I managed and supervised all those investigations. There were thousands of people who called, and they called about missing loved ones. One particular person had called about their missing loved one, and they lived in the Larkfield area. We developed a plan for trying to search for these folks. So we sent teams out and gave probability factors of people that perished in their home. One particular neighbor knew right across the street from him lived an elderly woman. So he actually went, knew the fire was coming. He pounded on her door, physically picked her up out of bed, carried her to his truck, and then they left the area. Every single home in that neighborhood was burnt to the ground. So that's that cohesiveness that all those neighbors have. So you guys have each other, and you guys need to depend upon each other, and we'll be there to help you out as soon as we possibly can. But we can't be everywhere all at the same time. It really takes that bond that you folks have as neighbors, and we see that here today. Again, it goes back to making the best decision that you possibly can given the circumstances, and that's what we're going to try to help you folks out with as well.
So just my background, I've been with the Sheriff's Office for 2.5 years. I manage our public outreach program, and since the fires, I've had dozens of conversations like this with people about what evacuations look like and how to be prepared. And I often hear questions like, how do I know where to go? What if the road is closed? Where do I go? How do I get information? Because all of that is so chaotic in the first, several minutes or longer of an emergency. So when it comes to getting information, I have some resources here listed. First and foremost, please do not call 911 for information. I know it might sound silly, but our dispatchers took hundreds of calls per hour when the Tubbs fire broke out, and their energy needs to be focused on people who need help right away. I'm not discouraging you from calling 911 if you need help. Please, 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 call us if you need us. But if it's just trying to get information, 911 is not the source. So there are some other sources listed on here. The first is socoemergency.org. That's the website that County Department of Emergency Management maintains. And when an evacuation happens, they put information on that website as quickly as possible. Nixle is another source. The Sheriff's Office will send follow-up nixles to you. Once we put out the initial evacuation order, we'll put out information such as where, further evacuations, so you can see the trend of who needs to move and when, shelter locations, things like that. So make sure that you're signed up for Nixle and have your cell phone on you if at all possible. The Sheriff's Office will also put out information on our social media sites. So we recommend that today you follow us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter if you don't already. Those are the primary ways that we get information to you during a disaster that's not that immediate alert, but it's that follow-up information that you might need. And again, we get it out as quickly as we can, but the nature of emergencies are sort of chaotic, and as soon as we have the info, we'll get it to you. 211 is another resource. You can call 211 for resources and information, and they are beefing up. It's now run by United Way of the Wine Country, and they're beefing up that program to be more and more helpful during a disaster or a large-scale emergency. And the other place to turn to is local news and radio. KSRO did an extraordinary job during our fires. I listened to Pat Kerrigan on the way into work to get briefed before I got officially briefed. She was amazing, and that's the kind of local knowledge that's really important to help you have that kind of information. And she was on the radio before I was in the EOC that night. She was on it. So finding those local news stations that you trust right now and identifying them now so you know to turn to them during an emergency. And on that note, we have a list of things that you can do today and that you should do today when you leave.
Again, if you folks want a copy of the PowerPoint, I'm sure we could get that for you, but take a look at the screen. And the most important thing is SoCo Alert and Nixle. We have a partnership with the county, as Zach was talking about. It's a partnership that we have to try to keep everybody safe. If you need to take a picture of that right there, go ahead. But the biggest thing is I know we really depend upon our phones here. I don't live out here in the West County area, but the first thing I thought when I was driving was, is my phone going to work? So I have one phone that has AT&T, the other one has Verizon. Verizon works like a champ out here. So just know that obviously your phone, some things aren't going to work. And just know your neighborhood like the back of your hand. Don't rely upon your phone so much, but just that's the knowledge, that's the foundational knowledge that you folks have out here by living out here. So maybe some of you are fortunate enough to be able to work here as well, but just know the area.
What's the knock?
So the Knox box is a small little device that attaches to a gate or to your front door, and it's got a master key of your home inside of it. So that way the firefighters don't have to break down their door just to enter your home. Is that about right, Zach?
Yeah. Do you use landlines also besides cell phone?
For Nixle alerts or for any type of notifications?
Yeah.
We do. So we have essentially a reverse 911 system. So during the Tubbs fire, we use that as well. So it's one option. The challenge is that a lot of people don't have landlines, and it doesn't always work with VoIP, the voice over internet protocol. It often works with those hardwired landlines, but with the new landlines, it sometimes doesn't. So there's various degrees of reliability on that. Yeah. I think
There's questions, cards.
got it. Yeah, so I think at this point I'm going to turn it over to Amy and the other facilitators because I know they have a plan for Q&A and we're at the end of our formal presentation, but we want to make sure that we get to all of your questions and answers. So I'm going to turn Lynn. Linda. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot about her supervisor.
Thank you guys so much for the putting together the presentation, and I want to say thank you to every single person who showed up tonight. I know that we had stiff competition. There was something on television. Was it the start of a new season of Survivor or Shark Week or maybe a remake of Lord of the Flies? No, that was the Democratic debates, right, that are on tonight. One thing that I often get frustrated with, being in government, is the length of time that it takes for us to get things done, right? And so if I were in your seats right now, I would be hearing like, okay, we've got a lot of future programs, but what about now? What are we doing now, and what can government do for you now? So I'm going to try to talk to that. I'm going to talk about two things, money and roads, which I know probably one is a little bit more exciting to you than the other right now, I'm just guessing. I think that one thing that we have going for us right here in Occidental is an absolutely amazing Fire Safe Council, and I have been so blown away by the leadership, not only of the Bohemian Corridor that has formed, really kind of bringing together the community around businesses, around the farmers market and things like that, but also these leaders who just came out of nowhere, Amy and Bob and Carol and Ruthie. It's just been really inspiring to see their work. So you guys are moving faster than us, which is a good thing, because even though we might not be caught up with you on a county-wide level, there are some funding opportunities that I think that you guys can avail yourselves of. And being the first out of the gate, you can be the front of the line for those funding opportunities. So the same money that brought you the little sidewalk out here, and also some improvements at Occidental Fire, will also open up for grants for community preparedness. So that could be anything from you want to, host a ham radio class in Occidental and buy some ham radios. It could be maybe you want to get ahead of us on our hazard mitigation grant and actually buy a bunch of those weather radios. Maybe it's that Chief Lenardi decides that he would like to, work on siren installation locally before we're looking at that county-wide opportunity. All of those things could be eligible for this grant funding, which you can work with my office. The opportunity is open now. We expect to make the first awards probably late September or October. So anytime you want to talk to us, just give me a call, send me an email, and either I myself or my staff will follow up with you. So really all it takes at this point is an organization and an idea. And we can hit go and empower the community to get ahead of the big sort of bureaucratic organizational institution, which we are doing good things at the county. It just takes us longer than it will take you to get a ham radio, operator class going, right? So I think that there are things that we can do immediately, even as we wait on these other opportunities. Now those kinds of funds, I'm thinking of something from, like $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, maybe up to $10,000 if we're looking at, something with partnering with the fire district. There is also for the next week an opening for a major investment. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which opens up from the federal government every time we have a declared disaster, is currently open. And it's the NOI, which is a Notice of Intent, so it's not a full grant application. But if you have an NOI that you would like to submit, especially coming again from one of our fire districts, and I know that Chief Lenardi and Chief Bullard are back there somewhere behind the blinding lights in my eyes, yes, hello, that we would be happy to work with you to facilitate submitting an NOI if there are any major investments. Now those investments require a 25% local match. We have actually set aside millions of dollars of county general fund to create the local match for those projects. So if you've got ideas, please come and find me after the meeting, because I would like to help make those ideas, turn them into reality. Next up, roads, right? This is a huge problem, and I'm not telling you anything that you don't know or haven't probably already emailed or called me about Coleman Valley. It's a huge problem. We had 110 major road failures, and I think but 2 of them were actually in the 5th District in West County that I represent in the February storms. Transportation and Public Works has been working around the clock to do whatever they can. FEMA recently came through for a second tour of our road failures, because apparently one isn't good enough to recognize that, yes, we need a long-term solution for Coleman Valley Road. That's the federal government for you. Never, why go with quick when you can go with redundant effort? So we are working on it. I'm going to warn you, it's going to take time, because this process of negotiating with the federal government unfortunately takes time. But I want you to know that I will continue to lean on both our federal legislators as well as Transportation and Public Works to try to get that done as quickly as we possibly can. Now another thing I want to talk about with roads is just general pavement condition. which, as you all know, on many roads is abysmal. It's been decades of underinvestment, and we are climbing out of a deep hole when it comes to the condition of our roads. In the first 2 years that I was in office, we invested $18 million in repavement in West County roads. It doesn't go very far because we need a lot of full-depth reclamations, which means you have to chew up the whole road and lay down a whole new road bed. But what I would love all of your help advocating, because Measure M, the original Measure M, not the Parks one, which was the one that was passed basically to widen Highway 101, and they threw a few sort of special projects in the country areas, to kind of make us happy. That is going to be up for reauthorization next November. I am going to fight very, very hard for money for rural roads in Sonoma County, particularly tourism impacted roads, and particularly sort of our downtown, small town, curb and gutter areas, right? We have such a hard time getting into those areas because they're not quite as high traffic volume, but they're really, really critical to the integrity of our communities. So if you all could join with me in that effort, we need to lobby the Sonoma County Transportation Authority. And that entire board. So we want to start sort of, sending them emails, sending them letters, maybe showing up at their meetings to try to make sure that our needs are prioritized. Because in my opinion, if we make our roads better, that also enhances our public safety and our ability to evacuate in the event of a disaster. Another conversation that I just had with our Director of Transportation and Public Works is that we need to look at how wide are we mowing, right? Oftentimes, when we mow, right, it's only a couple of feet into the side of the road. If we're actually starting to think about evacuation planning, we need to go wider. Which is going to be controversial, right? Because sometimes, that might mean cutting into someone's bush that maybe, helps shield their houses. So I think it's something that we need to do sensitively, right? We need to look at what are our critical evacuation routes in the community based on the work that Zach is doing with the Department of Emergency Management, identify those critical evacuation routes, and then get very serious about really taking them and making them wider so that if, for instance, there were a vehicle crashed, while there was an evacuation trying to take place, you would actually have some space to pull around, which I know is not possible everywhere because a lot of times in West County there's a hill on one side and there's a creek on the other. But in the areas that we can widen the road a little bit, even in a rough way, I think that would really help with our evacuation planning. So I need your help on the roads measure next year because we really need to make sure that we're thinking about rural roads and not just kind of the 101 corridor as so often happens in Sonoma County. I need your ideas. Because we can turn those ideas either into small community grants or into really big picture grants where we could actually get even hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars to make really critical investments and improvements in our community. The last thing that I want to put in a plug for are our volunteer firefighters and our paid firefighters out in West County. And that is because there is no such thing as a fail-safe evacuation alert warning system, right? This is why when you see this presentation, there are lots of different systems because we are going to try every single one of them because every single one of those has failed in a community that was experiencing a disaster. The county received a lot of deserved criticism for not utilizing the WEA or wireless emergency alert and warning. We actually subsequently ran a test in Guerneville. We drew a sort of an area and said, okay, we're going to issue a test. And pretty much no one in downtown Guerneville actually got that WEA alert, including not a single firefighter who was stationed on duty at the fire station at the time that the alert was issued. And that is something that unfortunately the county has to rely on our service providers, so on Verizon, AT&T, all those guys, to issue that alert in a sort of geo-targeted area. But by the way, a couple people in Occidental got the alert that was supposed to go to Guerneville. That's not helpful, right? So the best fail-safe system is people helping people in a disaster. And so you need to look to the amazing deputies who were absolute heroes during the 2017 wildfires, and you need to look at the firefighters who are in your community who will be here if it hits the fan, who also did unbelievably heroic things. West County was really the first response in East County that night. And what our firefighters did we owe them a lot. We owe them a lot more than they have been getting in terms of funding from the county, which is something that they know that I am also working on. But again, that's one of those future things. So my question is, what can you do? Support your local fire department, and also become as much of a volunteer as you can be, right? Even if that just means volunteering to getting to know your neighbors, volunteering to getting to know who might have some vulnerabilities. You know, maybe they're on durable medical equipment, maybe they're on oxygen, and in the event of a PSPS, that power safety, public safety power shutoff, you know, they're gonna be out, unable to actually access some critical equipment. So you need to go and knock on their door. You know, you can also join the Fire Safe Council and get involved in a more, you know, significant way, whether it's writing newsletters, as you were saying, or whether it's actually being kind of a neighborhood block captain. But the biggest predictor of how communities fare in any kind of an emergency is how connected they are to one another. And that also determines whether or not they will rebuild. And this is true in every disaster across the country, around the world. It's those personal connections that matter. And you know, if I did anything of value during the fires, it did not at all come from my role as a county supervisor working in government. It came from the amazing human beings that I worked with in West County. I was calling, you know, Catherine Couch from Ceres and getting food delivered, you know, to some of the CAL FIRE camps that were stationed all around West County. It was all about those community connections. Hey, I know a guy with a shower trailer. Let's get it to the, you know, evacuation center that doesn't have showers. Hey, I know a guy with a refrigerator truck. We can get some food. You know, those are the things that will actually help you. So just the fact that you're here, that's a huge, huge step in the right direction. And before you leave, if you see someone in this room that you don't know, just go up and shake hands and say hi, because that might be the person who knocks on your door when the fire's coming, right? So thank you all for coming here tonight, and then I'm gonna hand it over to the team for facilitating the questions. And again, here we go. All right.
So I think I'm going to start off this question and answers here. So we have two of them that are very similar. So I'll read off one of them. I don't have a smartphone. I don't do text messages. The only way to notify me is to call my landline phone. Is there a system that will do that? So as a quick answer to that is SoCo Alert. One of the things that we do every year is we buy all the landline data in the county and we put that into the system. So if you have a landline, it's already in there. If you have a cell phone or you have an email address, we don't have a way of capturing that. So that's why we ask you to sign up. Same thing with Nixle. That part's the sign up. But if you do have a landline phone, a traditional landline phone in the county, we already have that in the system. So that's question number one.
Okay. I got a question. Can we move to allow rainwater catchment and storage for Camp Meeker rural residential area? Absolutely. That sounds like a great idea, and possibly one that, you know, if there were a grant application and this is for fire prevention, you know, in response, that absolutely, let's work on that. And if there's a permitting issue, which I'm kind of getting the sense of from this let's sit down with Tennis Wick, who's our director of Permit Sonoma, to try to work through that, because I think that we need to get creative with guidelines when we're talking about disaster preparedness.
So I have one, it's how to know what evacuation routes are too crowded to use. So you're really not going to know until the emergency happens, right? But know that you have to have multiple options. You have to have more than one. Think of those main arteries that come in and out of Camp Meeker or Occidental, and use those. Be extremely familiar with those. A lot of you are well aware there's no streetlights out here. So you just have to know that in the back of your mind, and just know the routes like the back of your hand, like I mentioned earlier.
If I could just follow up on that. One thing that I do, I'm really directionally challenged. So I will drive around and get lost so I can find my way again, because I know that I won't always have a GPS. So I recommend going and getting lost and finding your way again. It's not a bad thing. I have a question here about animals and how long you have to gather your animals or go home to get other things. And the answer is, it depends. You could have 10 seconds, you could have 48 hours. It just depends on the emergency. So my best recommendation there is make sure that you're already packed and prepared, especially on red flag warning days. Make sure that your pets are packed up or ready to be packed up, that you have their food, their medicines, their bowls, their leashes, their harnesses, their trailers. I'm trying to picture all the pets in my mind, and be prepared to go at a moment's notice.
Okay, the next one's on fire cameras. If I see smoke in the sky near my house, what website do I check to see what's causing it? So, alertwildfire.com/North Bay. So if you go to alertwildfire.com, there's about 10 different regions in the state that have fire cameras, and fire dispatch centers are constantly using it. So that's who's monitoring them. And as they get 911 calls in about smoke in the area, they'll move the camera around to try and find that location. So they're on a lot of the ridge tops. So there's one on Mount Jackson, there's one on Pole Mountain. So there's a number of cameras in the area. The other option that you can do, especially if you have a smartphone, is download Pulse Point. It's an app, and as Redcom, our fire and EMS dispatch center, gets calls and they start sending resources out, you can actually see what's going on in their dispatch center. So if you do have smoke in the area, you can log into that and see what's going on. Maybe it's several miles away, maybe it's next door, but that's another good option for you to look at. Pulse Point. So it's based off of helping neighbor helping neighbor when you're having a heart attack. So you can get an idea of, it will send out a notification saying, hey, somebody in your area needs help with CPR or an AED. But the other side of that app is the fire dispatch CAD.
It's alertwildfire.org.
Alertwildfire.org/North Bay.
Excuse me, can you ask if the people outside are able
Yes,
to hear?
Tina.
Can everyone outside hear
It's
us?
okay now?
Yep, we're good.
Okay.
All right, unsurprisingly, I have a number of comments about roads, particularly about roadside mowing, focusing around Bodega Highway and also DuPont Road. I have now received those complaints, and I will send an email directly to our Director of Transportation and Public Works to try to get them on the list as quickly as possible. But anyone who has any questions about specific roads, roadside mowing, please email me and also report it via SoCo Report It. So we've got a little app, or it's also available on a website. Just Google SoCo Report It, and you can basically file complaints about our road system. That also applies to potholes. But I also like being looped in, actually, because I want to make sure that it's dealt with quickly. And so if there are ones that you've reported maybe 6 weeks ago or 3 months ago on SoCo Report It and you're not getting anywhere quickly, please email me and I will take it up directly with the Director of Transportation and Public Works, because those are really critical for fire safety and for evacuation capability. So potholes, roadside mowing, SoCo Report It, or email me, linda.hopkins@sonoma-county.org.
Say that once more.
Linda with a Y, .hopkins@sonoma-county.org. And the app or website is SoCo Report It.
I have a related question. Does the county do any tree trimming? Like Bittner's a tunnel, but heck, we can't trim those trees. They're way up there.
So I would need to look into, so most of our tree trimming that we do is kind of like more of the brush working low. Tree trimming is usually more the purview of PG&E, trimming it for power lines. But I can definitely, it's a question that I can ask our Director of Transportation and Public Works. So if you send me an email, then I'll be able to email you back with a follow-up. If you do that would be fantastic.
Just so everybody knows, all of the sites that they're listing, we will have on our Facebook page as well as on our website, firesafeoccidental.org. So we'll have a list of all of these for you.
Linda, that last website, SonomaCountyWhat.org?
So that was my email. So SoCo Report It is the Linda.Hopkins at sonoma-county.org.
Sonoma-county.org.
Yeah. Thanks.
So somebody had a question regarding fireworks complaints. Those go through the sheriff's office. So I'm sure, obviously, as you might imagine, during the 4th of July, there's probably a ton of them. So obviously there's a huge fire danger when it comes to those fireworks going off. And this particular resident ended up contacting the responsibles and they refused to stop. So if you ever have a situation like that, call the sheriff's office. Please leave your name and a contact number, and just have a simple conversation with the dispatcher and let them know that you would like to speak to a deputy, and then we'll make sure that that deputy does make personal contact with you. You can request that by phone. So if you have a situation where maybe you don't get along with your neighbor, you don't want your neighbor to know who's calling, then we can contact you by phone. And that is our responsibility.
Okay. So I have a question about information, that it's great to have so many information sources, but that confusion is bound to happen. Do you have a mechanism for minimizing conflict? And the answer is yes. So yes, confusion is bound to happen no matter what. But yes, we have a system to minimize that to the maximum extent possible. So I do public information during disasters. I was here at the Tubbs fire and all the fires in 2017. And then I also went up to the campfire for 12 days up in Paradise too. And the system is the same no matter where you go. And that is in the Emergency Operations Center. It's very structured. So when you have your public information, that information is vetted for accuracy before it's actually published. The sheriff's office plays well with our EOC members, so we're making sure that we're not, to the best of our ability, not putting out conflicting information. The other challenge is social media, because I'm sure you all know that 100% accurate information comes out on social media. So part of our job at the EOC and the sheriff's office is rumor control. So we actually have people monitoring social media sites to find those rumors and put out correct information. So the best response I have for this question is find your reliable sources of information now. We do our best to make sure that we're putting out clear, accurate, consistent information with our partners in the Emergency Operations Center, but we don't control everybody else in the world. So find those reliable sources now.
Okay, so here's a question that we get a lot. When we hear the local siren, do the ring counts mean something? And I know the two fire chiefs are in the back, so hopefully they'll correct me if I'm wrong here. But, so Grayton already does this, and I believe, talking to the chief tonight, that Occidental is gonna start doing this in a couple weeks. So if there is an emergency and I need you to pay attention to what's going on and start going to these websites to get situational awareness, the siren is gonna go up to peak, and it's gonna stay at peak for about 3 minutes, and then it'll come back down. So your normal volunteer recall, the siren goes up and then back down, and up and back down. The emergency, hey, you guys really need to start paying attention, is it goes up to peak and stays at peak. So that's how we're planning on using the sirens at this point at the local fire stations. So hopefully that answered that question.
Will that be both Grayton and Occidental?
Yes.
Thank you.
So currently Occidental and Grayton are the only two that are using their sirens at that point. We're still developing our community alert and warning plan in the county, but that is gonna, our goal is to get it standardized across the county with all the fire stations. If they do have a siren on site, that's how they will utilize it.
Okay, so this card says Green Valley Road floods during severe rain. I actually disagree with that. It floods during heavy fog, but so the channels dug are again filled. Is this situation being addressed? Yes, it is. I have been working really since I got elected with the water agency on maintaining this channel. So we have done a couple of emergency rounds of work there, and it's a really pain in the butt process of permitting with various state agencies, which I'm guessing this person lives in the area and is aware of all the challenges that we face. So we still are moving forward and working on that longer term solution, which will involve sort of greater excavation. And if whoever wrote this sends me an email, I can check in with Ann DeBay and see where we are this season, and I would be happy to follow up with that. So I can check in with the water agency, because last I heard that we were going to be moving forward with more work this season, but I want to circle back to the water agency and make sure that's true.
So here's a question regarding if there's a plan for taking down trees that are blocking the roads during these emergencies. During that, this happened to some of our deputies during the fires. So it's a very extremely dynamic event, so that's why having alternative escape routes is extremely important. So when we will get to them when we can, either the fire department, roads, county roads will get to it, but during an extremely dynamic event, and you can't get through that road, then alternative routes are going to be very, very important.
What if there isn't one?
If there isn't one,
Right.
then you just have, you really have to be just extremely creative. I mean, I know there's probably more than one tractor out here in this area, but again, it's just going to be an extremely dynamic event that's going to happen. You just have to think outside of the box.
Because in the campfire, that's what, I mean, the Paradise Fire, that's where the problem was, is that people couldn't get out. We have Joy Road, Coma Valley Road, and Bidner Road, all of them have the same situation. Trees come down, we won't be able to get out of here.
It's a matter of maybe trying to find some of those safety zones as well. During the Tubbs fire, Coffee Park, a very huge park, was used as a safety zone. So it's just, you have to take advantage of what's there.
And I would say beyond that, too, like the lieutenant mentioned, there's more than one tractor out here, there's more than one chainsaw out here. West County, we're pretty independent people. So if it were me and I had the means to cut it out myself, then I would. And make a path through. I know there's lots of different ways to get through it, but like the lieutenant said, be creative, take charge, do what you have to do. Our next question is about PG&E and notifying users who are not account holders, so renters, roommates, housemates, etc. So the question about PG&E I'm going to put in the parking lot so that the Fire Safe Council can follow up on, but I want to address the fire department's response and what you can do too. I'm sorry, the sheriff's office response. When public safety power shutoffs are happening, the sheriff's office is going to share that information via Nixle and social media. So again, sign up for Nixle, follow the sheriff's office on Facebook and Twitter. So we're going to make sure that we share that to spread the word because it does impact so many people. The other comment I have is that if you are not the account holder, ask your landlord to be added to their alerts. That's what I did. I'm the account holder and my boyfriend is not, and he lives with me. I signed him up. I didn't even tell him. I just signed him up and then he got a text message saying, did you sign me up for something? So you can do that because you can register multiple people and multiple phone numbers. So when you go to pge.com/mywildfirealerts, you have to be an account holder to get those alerts, but ask the account holder to add you so that you're not left in the dark in that situation.
And to tie into that, this one's going to go in the parking lot as well, but it's based on generators. So people are buying generators to use in the event of lack of power. So just, the reason I'm putting this in the parking lot is we have a link, and I'll get it to the Fire Safety Council, on how to wire your generator into your house. There's a right way to do it and a wrong way to do it. If you do it the wrong way, you're going to back de-energize those lines, which become a fire hazard, and they also become a life safety hazard for those first responders and the PG&E crews working on those lines. So they always treat the lines like they're live, but they're expecting them to be dead when they've de-energized them. So if you backfeed them, that causes an issue. So I'm going to put this in the parking lot, but I did want to address that yes, there is a right way and a wrong way to hook up a generator.
This one is a great question. It says, the state's long-term wildfire goal is to have people shelter in place. However, there are no guidelines for doing this, not even at the national level. What can the Board of Supervisors do to streamline a permit process for shelter-in-place construction? By comparison, Australia has had shelter-in-place guidelines in place for years. There are even companies that sell approved prefab fire bunkers. I think that this is a critical question to ask, and this is the kind of thing where I would love to have a grant application and someone who is willing to put one of these on their property so that we can make it a pilot project and I can get it through Permit Sonoma, right, as a pilot project that could serve as a model for the entire county. I will say that partly because I have a 6-month-old baby who wakes up like 3 or 4 times a night, I lie awake at night at 2 a.m. thinking about these kinds of communities like Occidental, like many of our roads around here where they are one way in, one way out communities with a tremendous amount of timber and not a lot of open areas, right? And that is, think about it, most of my district, look at the lower Russian River, look at the North Coast, it's all the same. Roads that are often not even standard widths, right? Sometimes those 2-lane roads are really the width of 1 lane, right? The fire trucks can barely get through. We need to come up with creative solutions. And I think that shelter in place is critical. So if we can create some kind of a pilot project, if someone has, a little bit of a meadow on their property that they're willing to make a site, let's figure out how to do that. So I would really love to follow up with the Fire Safe Council if there's any volunteers in this room. Talk to them, talk to me, and let's see what we can do, because I think shelter in place is going to be critical. You look at I feel like I'm pretty lucky in Forestville. I'm at the intersection of like River Road and 116. Those are major arterials for West County. But think about 13,000 people between Forestville and Duncan's Mills all trying to use those roads at the exact same time, right? It is going to be critical to have clearings, to have bunkers, to have shelter in place locations. So great question, and I would love to work on this.
You're out.
So when is the September alert and warning test? So the September alert and warning test is going to be in the morning of September 5th. And Tim Romero, who is our alert and warning manager, he's going to be outside helping people sign up for SoCo Alert if you haven't done that already. He's the guy to talk to about that alert. And I'm going to do one more and then I'll pass it over here. So let's hear. So many of the resources for emergency that were mentioned do not include deaf people. What do you have planned for that? So that is a great question, because that is an issue. A lot of the alert and warning programs out there do not take into fact the AFN community, the Access and Functional Needs community. So that is the reason why we've done a pilot project with the National Weather Service, with the weather radios, and that is one of the things that we're testing in September, is actually launching that to send out a message to the community to make sure that that is functional. One of the nice things about the weather radios is they have a lot of AFN components that you can add to it. You can add a strobe light, you can add a bed shaker, you can add a bunch of different things. So that is another tool in our toolbox. So when we're using all these multiple things to notify you, that is another one that we'll be using to get that message out to those critical populations.
Got another great question about roads. In the Tubbs 2017 fire, a friend who was evacuating said the smoke was so thick she had to open the driver's door on her car to see the yellow line in the middle of the road. May we have all the yellow and white road lines repainted on our roads so we can see the road when the smoke is thick? That is a great question, and I thought that this would be one of those really easy ones, and I remember actually asking Transportation and Public Works about this. Unfortunately, a number of our roads in West County are essentially too narrow to be able to paint the yellow line in the middle, because it would not equal the size lanes that we're legally required to have, right? So that's a big problem. But what I would love to do is, if whoever wrote this question or anyone has roads that they would like me to look at to see if it's feasible to have them repainted, I would happily take that, create a list, and pass it on to Transportation and Public Works. And even if we can't do the middle line, we could still do the sidelines, right? And so I would love to come away with a list. And maybe, this would also be a potential role for the Fire Safe Council, is like, if you guys are willing to even just sort of drive around. So, we can take suggestions, but there could also be a concerted effort to go and see where the weak points are in our road system, which is probably everywhere in terms of the painting.
And the paint should be reflective paint.
Can they be painted in reflective paint was the question. That's a great question that I will ask Transportation and Public Works. It's a really good idea, because then obviously if you've got thick smoke but you still have headlights, that you'd be able to see them more easily. So I will definitely ask that question.
Okay. How can Sonoma County offices help organize community volunteers and appropriate training? Can we create available funding for this? So the lady right there in the doorway, staring at me, that's Dr. Nancy Brown. She is our new community engagement manager, or community preparedness manager. I'm not sure. It's one of those two titles. She's out there. She's going to be sitting right next to Tim Romero, that community alert and warning manager that I told you about just a minute ago. She is the one to answer that question. That is what she's kind of been charged with, is helping the county move forward with engaging with volunteers and getting that preparedness, getting the word preparedness out there.
Another question, can the fire fees collected per parcel by the Board of Equalization be available to homeowners to clean up the fuel load on their properties? I'm not sure exactly what this refers to. If you live somewhere where there is a fire district and you pay a fire district tax, that goes to your local fire department. But if you're talking about, there also are state fees that we pay for being part of the state responsibility area. That goes to CAL FIRE. We have no control over that. However, there will be a new opportunity that we are opening up, again, one of those future programs that is in process. Right now, we have something called SCIPE, the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program. And you can basically install solar on your rooftops and then actually have that added to your property taxes and pay it off over time and get a loan through the county for that upfront cost. We will actually be expanding that program to cover home hardening. And so that is something that is not immediately available, but will, and I think by the end of this calendar year, be a program that we will open up to the public. So if you are having a challenge financing home hardening, this will open up the opportunity to better prepare yourself for disasters.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah. So the current program is called SCIPE, the Sonoma County Energy Independence Program. And so that's a model that was, the state legislature basically allowed us to do that on a local level, and we did. And the state legislature just passed a bill that said, hey, you can use that same kind of local financing structure for home hardening. And so by the end of this year, we should have that program launched, so that if you can't finance it on your own and you want to get a loan and then pay it back on property tax bills over time, that we'll be able to help you with that. And we'll also have, like a resource website, so that we can't sort of tell you which vendors to use, but we can offer you kind of a warehousing of different vendors that you could look to for home hardening services.
Okay, last question for me. When will the evacuation plan be online? So, I think I referenced in the slides that the county plan is going in front of the board next week on Tuesday, August 6th. So once the board votes and adopts that plan is basically finalized. Now when we start talking about the regional and the community plans, as those get finalized, those will be published on the SoCo Emergency website, socoemergency.org. We are planning on getting that done October-ish. I apologize, I don't have a firm date for you, but that is our target, that is our goal, is to have at least the regional plans published on there, and then as we go around working with each community and we finalize those plans, those will be published. So the community plans are going to take a lot longer, but the county plan will be done next week, and then the regional plans will be done in the next couple months.
Last but not least, which I mentioned a little bit before, but what is happening with fixing Coleman Valley Road? And so I just want to explain, first of all, we did actually try to fix it last fall. Obviously it didn't go too well, but we did actually repair the culvert at that point. It wasn't just the normal process, which was dumping asphalt on something that's sinking, right? Unfortunately, the culvert crumbled, and we are now looking at a major structural failure that will actually require a geotechnical solution. So we're actually going to likely have to build essentially some kind of a bridge or major stabilization effort that will require substantially more than just fixing a culvert and throwing down some asphalt. So it is going to take time for us to not only work with FEMA to get that project cleared, but also to get the geotechnical analysis complete, find out how big of a solution we need. Is this really basically going to be sort of putting in spans, or can we just sort of drive some piles down? And there are a number of solutions that I have discussed with Transportation and Public Works, and as soon as I have any kind of a timeline from them, I will absolutely communicate it to the community via, I've got a newsletter in the Gazette, I've got an email newsletter, I try to update things on social media as well. So I will definitely keep you guys up to date, and I recognize what a critical evacuation route that is. I also want you to know that I am working with State Senator Mike McGuire to try to streamline the state permitting process. In my opinion, what the hell that we're in right now, which is that we go from fires to floods to fires, right? Like there's basically 2 seasons right now. There's fire season and there's flood season in Sonoma County. Means that we're always going to have roads that are in need of fixing that provide critical emergency evacuation routes for fire season. So we really need to figure out how we can move this process forward more quickly. We are still trying to fix Cazadero Highway from the slip out that happened when I first took office 2.5 years ago, right? Because of FEMA, because of state permitting processes. So we need to shape up and we need to get it done more quickly. So I'm working not only at the local level, but trying to figure out how we can streamline things with the state and federal government. So I don't have any immediate solutions right now, but I want you to know that it's a priority and I will do my best to work on that.
I know they want us to read the parking lot questions.
Okay.
You can do it or I can do it.
Okay, so we're supposed to read the parking lot questions. We don't have answers for them, but just so you know, we did recognize them and we will get back.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so the Fire Safe Council is gonna write down all the, they have all the parking lot questions and they'll follow up with us and get the information to you. Okay.
Okay, so first one, why can't PG&E drop their lines underground, or is there a plan for this in the near future?
I can actually mention something about that, which is that we actually do have some funds set aside in Sonoma County to look at undergrounding in partnership and in collaboration with PG&E. Ironically, the first community to access these funds is Freestone, of all places, because it had been on the list for apparently about 15 years, and it was actually more on the historical front of trying to underground the lines for the historical nature of the town. But we are going through a process right now of saying, you know what, okay, history is great, but we have a pressing fire danger, and we really need to prioritize based on that. So TPW will be looking at trying to analyze where the high-risk areas are to prioritize undergrounding at a local level. And then we also need to lean on PG&E to do their share.
Fire Safe Camp Meeker and Fire Safe Occidental has been working with PG&E, and one of the upcoming meetings will be with PG&E, just so you know. There's a lot of PG&E questions, and we have them coming. And they've been very cooperative, so we'll have them here as well.
And the next question is actually for you as well. How do I get a t-shirt?
On the way out, put in a donation, and actually, we would be...
Volunteer.
Yeah, volunteer. All the
targeted for West County, so it will increase the capacity in this area, and it will also be clearing some of the dead tan oaks from the side of the road as well. So we're still working on mapping that and seeing how many roads we can cover with the amount of money that we have available. So that waiting list should get shorter, at least hopefully around these parts.
Because those dead
And
meadows are a fire ladder.
Huge fire ladder.
And the card that was just handed to me is somebody is offering to help volunteer trim trees that can't be dealt with. So there's somebody in your community that's willing to help.
So we have several questions about Camp Meeker regarding the evacuation routes, the water system pumps, and zones within, Camp Meeker zones within the community. So that will be in the first slide.
Oh yeah, sure. This is just more feedback, and thank you for some particular roads that I will add to my list to talk to the director about. This says several of our roads are too narrow to put a line on the side, but have some reflectors to see the edge. Harrison Grade Road from Green Valley Road to the top has reflectors, but they are too far apart, and they need to be closer. So that is, I will pass that on to Transportation and Public Works.
Okay, so,
Right in my email right
so this one has 2 questions on it, so I'm just going to knock both of them out for the one page. Do alerts work for pagers? And I don't know. I'm going to have to follow up on that one for our vendor. And then the other question is, are vineyards a safe zone according to CAL FIRE? So that's the other question I don't know, and we'll have to get back to you on.
Any fire chiefs want to say anything?
Absolutely.
Thumbs up.
Okay, so,
Absolutely.
so vineyards are a safe spot.
Vineyards don't burn.
There you go.
We have the question I responded to earlier about PG&E notifying users and not just account holders. And I'm going to put this here in the parking lot so the folks can follow up with PG&E.
We're on Facebook, where do you go to find the sheriff's department?
Thank you. So our handle for Facebook is @sonoma.sheriff. So if you Google Facebook Sonoma Sheriff, it'll take you right to our page. Thank you for asking.
So the next question is, what risk zone is Occidental in? And I just don't have that information in front of me. So I do know it's on the higher side just because of the one-lane roads and the vegetation and the road conditions. I just don't know off the top of my head.
The next question is, can Occidental Fire Department join the Sonoma County Fire District? So I'll put that in the parking lot. And then I have, last one I have is, how will the use of candles and unregulated generators impact fire safety during PG&E public safety power shutoff? That will be in the parking lot as well.
Okay, got a couple more. How do we evacuate when our roads are covered and surrounded by burning fuel and trees? And then the second question is, we have only a few main routes to get out of the area. I feel they won't be passable for a very long time. For very long.
So while we're putting that in the parking lot specifically, I want to reiterate, get out early, don't wait, evacuate. There are times where you just can't prevent it, but seriously, get out early. That's the message here.
If you have the time.
Right.
If you have time, yeah. So I'm not saying you're always going to have the time. You may have 10 seconds. If you have advance notice, leave early.
You talked about tractors and stuff for Paradise though, and they had tires blowing up and melting on them, and you know, I mean, so to say we should be creative is one thing, but that's my question, that's my card, because I go up and down our roads all the time, and like, I just see Paradise in my brain with everything on fire.
I know.
And no tractor is gonna get us, or chainsaw is gonna get us out of here. You know, that's the truth of it, with the way the overhangs and stuff are.
Do you have a
Especially
follow-up
with the fire, I was a
question?
firefighter in Paradise. I was CAL FIRE for 10 years, and my chief back then knew he was gonna go. And it has a lot to do with the community's attitude and planning. And so a lot of had to do with Paradise.
I'll summarize.
Was that nobody wanted to have their trees cleared, or it was just part of the community feel, and they paid the price for it. So the fact that this is happening here, being proactive, there's gonna be some sacrifices made, including living in trees, clearing of trees, doing that kind of homework, and understanding fire safety and fire science means control rooms early in the season before
Right.
the trees dry out. It's critical.
So-
It's gonna mean losing some of them, but
Right.
it means not losing neighborhoods.
So Juan's comment is he's a firefighter, he was a firefighter up in Paradise, and that a lot of what happens is related to community attitudes about vegetation and trees. And in order to prevent some of that from happening, you have to be willing to have your trees trimmed or cut down and have your vegetation cut back. So it has it changes the look and feel of the area, but it makes it safer from fire. So that's summarizing his comments.
And the fire chiefs in the back might be able to help us with this one. What do firefighters use for water source in fighting a fire if it's just one house on Graydon Road?
We have a mutual aid plan in the county. We can ask for as many water tenders as we need. We'd like to keep our water mobile if we can. And I could ask for 20 water tenders if I needed it for any fire anywhere in the county.
So to summarize for those of you who couldn't hear, we do have water tenders, a number of water tenders in the county, and especially if it's just one house on fire, they can call in for mutual aid and have that water brought in. They like to use water locally, but they can call 20 water tenders if they need to.
How many gallons do those tenders hold?
Most of them are 2,000.
What about water tank? I got a 7,000 gallon water tank. And then you pump out of it?
So they have a 7,000 gallon water tank on their property. Can you pump out of it?
Yes, we can either go in through the top if we need to, draft out of it, or if you have the 2.5 inch national standard thread fitting at the bottom of the tank, which I believe the county requires now, we can draft out of it if we need to. Again, we would only use that if we need to and we have the time. Like I said, I like to keep the water mobile and keep our engines not tied to a solid tank. But we will use them. Most of the time you'll see mutual aid engines come in for structure protection. They will hook into the water tanks if they're stationed at different houses and use that water source.
So the short answer is yes. Okay, so next question.
Can I add something to that, because we're at Fire Safe, our water tank signs. And they're available, I don't know if we have any tonight, but we do have those signs available to put on the tanks that have accessible ports.
So Fire Safe Occidental is selling signs that you can put on your water tank saying that this is accessible to firefighters. Okay, next question. In the event of the evacuation is not a viable option, blocked roads, traffic, etc., I want to develop a plan to shelter in place. Do you have any recommendations for information on this subject? So we'll get back to you on that. And then lastly, what conditions will trigger electrical de-energization? So PG&E is coming out. They're starting to share more information as we push back on them saying, you're just going to let us know is not a viable option. So they're starting to share more information on that. I don't know, I don't have anything in front of me right now that says when they're going to actually, what that criteria is, but they are starting to share that with us. So when we get that, we'll be sure to share that with Fire Safe. Okay, I think that's it for the questions.
So before we close, I'd like Fire Safe Camp Maker to come up because we haven't really acknowledged, this is a joint presentation and organization. Fire Safe Camp Makers are organizing, we're organizing, and together we're putting on these events. So I'm going to bring them up, and just while I'm waiting for them to come up, I just want to tell you that one of the things that got me so involved in this so quickly was because I survived a wildfire at a different location before. And all I can say is I had employees on site, I had customers on site. I actually started evacuating long before I got the order from the Sheriff's Department because it frightened me to see a fire close enough that I felt like my customers and my employees might be at risk. And even in doing that, it was a high wind day, and I didn't have everybody off site by the time we got the order to evacuate, and we were scrambling. So what I can say is, if there's any possible situation, leave then, don't wait. Because when you're leaving then, there isn't a fallen tree. But if you're waiting until you get ordered, there might be. And then the other thing I want to say is that these organizations that we're trying to get with all the neighborhood groups, my neighborhood group has already come up with 2 alternative evacuation routes to get out of Joy Bridge by neighbors opening up back ways that they might have had, opening up gates. Next month, my neighborhood is going to take a walk down every one of these alternative accesses so that we can see where we would be going. We're putting up signs for each other. It's going to take your neighbors in a community. It's a village. And we're going to do this together. So you're going to find alternative ways in your small area, and that's going to get you to the next branch. And we're just going to do our best. But leave early. That's the best thing.
Hi, there's other people on our committee. Fawn Necton is also on our committee. She was here earlier. I don't know if she left. And where are you?
I'm right here.
There she is. And Sheila Denton from our community. So the thing that I want to say about Camp Meeker is one of the reasons we have our own group is because we have a particular issue, which is the 1-lane road to the density of our neighborhood. So we have our own group, but we are working very closely with Fire Safe Occidental, of course, because we're one community. So I really appreciate that Richard started this. He was the founder of the group, and so I'm going to let him say a few words.
There are 2 communities here and 2 fire safe councils actually. Now, starting in fall, we're going to be starting our planning for a community wildfire protection plan in Camp Meeker. We'll be having 3 public meetings and 6 planning team meetings with folks from CAL FIRE and other agencies. The first public meeting will be in spring. So all the Camp Meeker folks here, we would strongly encourage you to come along to those meetings. Thank you.
I just want to say the thing for Camp Meeker in particular, don't wait, get out.
And don't try to shelter in place or try to save your house with a garden hose.
Thank you, Richard. Coming. And Amy. Thank you. That's Amy Lemmer and Richard. What's Richard's last name?
Richard Seaman from Fire Safe Occidental. And my name's Ruthie Browning, and did I say Occidental? I'm sorry. From Camp Meeker. So we're wrapping up, but I wanted to just say a few words about, you know, why we're here. We're really here to support and be a resource to help our community. Because, and this is our mantra, a safer, connected community is a safer community. It's on our banner there. We really want you to join us. As you can see, can we turn the lights on? I would like to just have a show of hands and have everybody stand up that is volunteering on the Fire Safe Council in Camp Meeker and or the Fire Safe Occidental. Can you please stand?
And if you're against the wall, sort of move in.
Move in.
We'll see you.
Let us see you, because there's up to 50 volunteers right now putting on these community meetings through our education committee. We have 4 different working committees, including the Fire Safe Occidental Steering Committee, and we need more boots on the ground. We have some neighborhoods that aren't quite as connected as others. I'm really fortunate to live up on the ridge on Harrison Grade Road, and I have to say, when I first moved out here 5 years ago, we didn't know each other. Nobody knew each other. But I started walking, and I met Carolyn Sal, and Carolyn was out there walking, and she started doing the full moon walks every month. And so we started to get to know each other, and we were talking about the risk from the Tubbs fire. We were all really concerned. This was way back. We've been doing this almost 2 years. So we have a jump on the neighborhood organizing on the Harrison Grade Road neighborhood, but there's 16 neighborhoods in the Occidental Fire Safe area. And some of those don't yet have neighborhood leaders, and we really need people to step up, because again, a connected community is a safer community. So please join us. I want to point out this one handout that's on the table there. This will tell you who to contact if you want to be involved in a neighborhood community or in on the Fire Safe Council. Okay? Again, thank you so much for coming, and I'm going to hand this off. We have just one more.
Hi everyone, I just want to remind you one more time, don't wait, evacuate. Don't be a missing person. Ready, set, and go. Make sure that you understand all of that. And if you have any more questions about the Nixle or the SOCO alerts, these guys outside, they can sign you up. So have a redundancy. Make sure that you have more than one system, because if one system goes down, maybe you'll get an alert from another one. It makes sense, it really does.
All right, so on your way out, I just wanted to let you know what we've got available for you outside. If you don't already have a go bag, well, let's take a raise of hands. How many people have prepared a go bag? It's fire season. Yes, this is great. Now, some of you have not. We have an example of a go bag out on a table out there for you to look at. What kinds of things would you need in a go bag so that you're ready to go? We're also going to have a table out there with a weather radio and people that can show you how to use it, how to set it up, and can answer questions. So go find out and then go get a weather radio. There's also the table, if you didn't sign up on your way in, if you came in late, we'll have a table out near the map of the neighborhoods. Sign up, give us your email, we'll keep you as informed as we can. And then meet and greet these guys if you have more questions. And then come to our meetings, get involved in your neighborhood, and just do what you can to take care of each other. Have a great night. Thank you for coming.